Hi, I'm Stacy Bokind, and I'm doing my literacy theory presentation today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. The theory that I chose is the information processing theory, which eventually leads to the bottom-up, the literacy theory of bottom-up teaching or learning. Just to give some details about exactly what that is. The basic idea of information processing theory is that the human mind is just like a computer or an information processor. It consists of three main components, but first I'll just give you a little history. It seems to have really sprung up and mostly started to be written about and talked about in the 1950s and 60s when the first computers and information processors came about. I think a lot of neuroscientists and people doing research in all different fields about how we think and process information jumped right on that. It was a perfect metaphor, the way that you type information in units or chunks, and some goes this way and some goes that way, and just reminded them of how the human brain works. And so no one theorist has claimed responsibility for completely coming up with the information processing theory, but there are a lot of people who have written and done research on it and get credit for that. But the information processing model consists of three main components, and then I'll tell you what those are and then go into detail on each one. Sensory memory, working memory, long-term memory. Sensory memory enables people to manage limited amounts of incoming information during initial processing. The main purpose of sensory memory is to screen incoming stimuli and process only those stimuli that are most relevant at the present time. Another way to describe that is if you're driving down the road in your car and you've got buildings and restaurants and gas stations, businesses on both sides of you, the radio's going, they're talking about something on the radio, you've got traffic all around you, horns honking. Automatically, probably without you even thinking about it, that sensory memory just takes what it needs at that moment, just the bare minimum, and the rest just sort of falls out. You don't even notice it, or maybe you're not aware of everything that's going on or that you're passing by. It occurs too quickly for people to consciously control what they're thinking. These are fast and unconscious processes at this stage. Working memory has three parts. This is the next step in the diagram. It includes limited attention resources, automaticity, selective processing. Limited attention resources, all individuals experience severe limitations in how much mental activity they can engage in due to limited cognitive resources. Often differences between one learner and another are not due to the amount of resources, but how efficiently those resources are used. And I put this is why we forget things. There's just at this stage there is not room. Later when you get down the road to long-term memory there is, but in this middle stage of information processing, as far as this theory suggests, there isn't room for everything. So you're going to have a lot of limitations on what goes on in your working memory. Automaticity, very popular term this year in second grade with students reading but not fluently and with automaticity. Like they might be able to sound out those sight words, but they don't know it as soon as they see it automatically. Refers to being able to perform a task very quickly and efficiently due to repeated practice. Effective information processing and sensory memory requires a high degree of automaticity with regard to recognition. Some meaning or familiarity is usually attached for a thought to go beyond working memory. So if you're driving down that same road and maybe your daughter or someone mentioned to you a specific restaurant and you've never heard of it, but as you drive by it, you notice on the sign, oh, that's the one that she was talking about. That's what she meant. then that might be something that your working memory picks up on because you have some connection or attachment to that specific location. There usually needs to be some familiarity for it to go any further than working memory. And then there's selective processing, which refers to the act of intentionally focusing one's limited cognitive resources on stimuli that are most relevant to the task at hand. It's no coincidence that highly effective learners succeed because they can identify what's the most important, what do I need to learn, what is Ms. Bokine asking of me right now, and allocate that limited attention just to that relevant information, and nothing else kind of matters. A lot in working memory, it asks more questions than it answers for me. So that's something that I'm going to need to do additional research on in my own time. Why some students are so advanced at that and others aren't. If I'm asking the same thing of everyone at the same time, it's a whole group activity. Why can some do that selective processing? It just kicks in and they get done quickly, it's accurate, and the rest are still processing. What does she even want me to do right now? Long-term memory. The role of long-term memory is to provide a seemingly unlimited repository for all the facts and the knowledge in your memory. Most researchers believe that long-term memory is capable of holding millions and millions of pieces of information for a really long time, for a lifetime. That is obviously different for all of us. Going back to the working memory and then connecting that with a long-term memory. It's different for different students. It's different for different adults. So a theory is just that. It's a theory, and I think it is a good one. It explains things to me as a second grade teacher, because these kids are very different than my fourth grade students. But for instance, I can drive somewhere 2 or 3 times and then I don't need directions again. I can get there. It's just automatic. The car just seems to drive itself. There are lots of times I drive to work. I drive the same route every day, 180 days a year at least. And I don't think about it. Sometimes I get in the parking lot and I'm just here. I don't remember the drive. Versus my husband, who can go somewhere 15 times and still need to GPS it. So this theory explains those processes, but not the why behind the differences in how we're all using them and what our cognitive ability differences are. And this is just a chart that just kind of summarizes everything I said. So a thought or something comes in, some stimuli comes in here in the sensory memory. It either just instantly falls out. You don't even realize it. It's unconscious. It's just your brain is processing for you. It's either gone or it goes to the working memory. Something attaches there, something that makes a connection. It can go into the long-term memory where it gets encoded, or and it stays there for who knows how long, 40 years, and whenever you need it, you can retrieve it and bring it back into that working memory again and have those memories over and over, or those thoughts. And I think information that's truly learned, that's where it lives. If you're learning it for that day or for that lesson, and then you don't need it, or it didn't have any meaning, you didn't connect with it in any way, it's just going to be gone. But I hope most of my lessons are going to live in that long-term memory. This is just another chart that just kind of explains what I just verbally explained. So that information processing theory, springing up from that, is the bottom-up theory, and that contrasts with another learning literacy theory known as a top-down. And I want to go ahead and say, I know that I found a lot of conflicting research on those two. People either are really against this, and they just feel like it's not worth your time in the classroom, or they love the top-down theory. But I'm talking about for myself as a second grade teacher, or if I were a kindergartner or first grade teacher, I'm talking about really young kids. And so the bottom up theory for me, there has to be a starting place, a place to begin. For students who don't have anything, they need some building blocks, and then you can bring in that top-down theory of doing all those fun activities of really connecting with the lesson or what you're reading. Addie, make sure your thumb doesn't cover the lens. It's almost on the lens. What is it? It's a theory that reading proceeds in a linear sequence from letter to sound to word to comprehension in that order. So you're going to learn cat. First, you're going to learn that that's a C, that's an A, that's a T. C is ka, A is a, T is t. Put that together, cat. And then a picture of a cat that can go into that working memory and connect with that word is that object. And that is bottom up. Feature processing, letter processing, word processing, phrase processing, and then comprehension at the end of that. Top down would be the opposite. You would start with comprehension and predicting and forming pictures in your mind, talking about drawing conclusions. Have you ever seen a cat? Do you have a cat? And I get that, and that has definitely a place, maybe even by the end of this second grade year when they're almost going to third grade. I'm talking about a non-reader, essentially, someone not reading at this time. If you just hand someone a piece of paper and they don't know any words, they can't sound out anything at this stage, and you want them to make connections with it and to predict things and all of those other top-down processes, it'd be almost to me as if you gave me a piece of paper and it had some Chinese writing on it, and then you want me to talk about how that has meaning for me. And I don't think I'd be able to do that, and it could lead to frustration and going into a place where you have a more difficult time. So for now, I think that information processing theory supports the bottom-up theory, and I think it's a good one for this stage for me. One of the top theorists for information, not the information processing theory, but the bottom-up theory is Philip Gao. I'll toss in here, this is Philip now, not back in 1972, which that's the year I was born, so I know that was 44 years ago. Philip didn't look exactly like that. Philip is retired now. I'll tell you a little about him. He joined the University of Texas in 1967. So if you do that math, 1972, within only a few years of joining the faculty, he was already doing a lot of important things. He served as chair of the Department of Psychology from 1975 to 1979, co-director of the Center for Cognitive Science from 77 to 87. He did a lot of other great things, and he retired in the spring of 2004. He's very active on Facebook. He does a lot of cool things on his Facebook. So a Facebook friend requested him. He has not responded yet, but he wrote an article in an educational journal, which I think is so surprising. It wasn't even a whole book, but at the time it was very popular and kind of set, a lot of people that read those journals, education on its ear, 1 second of reading. And that's where you see this bottom-up theory really described and called that for the first time. He described in that article reading as a sequential or serial mental process. Readers, according to Philip Gao, begin by translating the parts of written language, the letters, into speech sounds, and then piece those sounds into individual words, then piece the words together and come up with the understanding of what the author's intent was that they were trying to say, the written message. And if I'm saying this wrong and it's go or if it's not Gal, you're probably cringing. I apologize. I couldn't find anything where his name was being pronounced, so I have to just go with it. And then there's LaBerge and Sandals, not Sandals, Samuels. This is the two of them now. I'm giving their current picture. All of these theorists are still with us and working and doing great things, which I was kind of surprised about. I put their pictures under their names. I gave them top billing here, but I don't know that that's fair. Samuels immediately got out of Queens College in New York, started teaching elementary education, and he's still a professor at the University of Minnesota now. He's teaching educational psychology, and he's still doing research on the reading process and the best series for teaching that, which I think is great. David LaBerge, really, it's so odd that he even was involved with this project. The book, they wrote a book together, Theory of Automatic Information Processing, because his whole life really has not had to do with education and reading and processing. And in another field that he works in full time, he did a lot of research on automaticity, and that must be the connection that he made with Samuels, where they were like, yeah, I'm thinking about that too. Let's do this project together. Other than this theory of automatic information processing that they did together, he doesn't have anything to do with the field of literary research or reading. Application to all learners. Bottom-up processing starts with text, whether that's a child, an illiterate adult, somebody that's learning English as a second language or it's a new language to them. I think that this is a good place to start. You've got to have some building blocks. I think that's why in kindergarten, this is what teachers use, and they start there. And then if you have a student who's past kindergarten but they're still on that level, same thing. You got to have a place to start. Literacy is not just reading. It's writing, it's listening, it's even speaking. And those are skills that are needed in every classroom. If it's science, social studies, they don't do language arts in that classroom. Even specific content classes. I made a note down here. I used to say this all the time as a 3rd and 4th grade teacher. Parents would come in and there would be concern because their child was not reading, and I'm sending home, government unit or land forms unit, and they're just thinking, shouldn't he know, or shouldn't Johnny know how to read before we go to that level? And I used to just, I feel bad now, take pride in saying, well, you know what, in 3rd grade, we are reading to learn. We're not learning to read, and I don't teach reading in 3rd grade. They're supposed to have that before they got here. And I don't even think that's like a such thing, learning. Okay, so my 9-year-old camera woman had some technical difficulties, and unless I can learn how to splice video tonight, I'm going to have to just embed a sequel, a part 2 to my presentation. Implications for instruction. The information processing model provides 3 important implications for improving learning and instruction. How will this all apply in my classroom? The first is that understanding that memory stores are extremely limited in both sensory and working memory, those first 2 parts of the theory model. The 2 main strategies that effective learners use to cope with that limited capacity are selectively focusing their attention on what's important and engaging in as much automated processing as possible. If you're not having to stop to go to do cat, then you are automatically comprehending and doing other cognitive processes that make you a better reader. And also focusing on exactly right now in this lesson, what does Ms. Bokine want from me? What should I be putting my attention toward right now? From an educational perspective, it's essential for students to become automated at basic skills like letter and word decoding. You don't want to stay up in that bottom-up theory and what that would lead you to do in your instruction forever. That's obvious. Automaticity makes available limited processing resources that can be used to engage in labor-intensive self-regulation and comprehension monitoring, working on those other like top-down skills. Implications for instruction. A second aid to instruction is that relevant prior knowledge helps students retrieve necessary information. Highly effective learners possess a great deal of organized knowledge within a particular domain, such as reading, math, or science. A third implication is that automated information processing increases your cognitive efficiency by reducing information processing demands. If a student can just extricate only the information that they need right then at that time from all the other information and stimuli coming in, they can focus on other activities such as drawing, inferences, and connecting new information to existing information in memory. Just I think of the students in the classroom and how hard it is for a second grader to do that, to eradicate the kids rolling on the floor, someone talking, I'm doing small groups, someone else is on the computer, things are coming over the intercom, and just take out what's going to help them right then. Specific application across content areas. When you're talking about content-specific teachers, science, social studies, math, this is a theory that can be used and is good for everyone. Even in high school where they are content specific, and you might have a teacher who says, that's the language arts reading teacher. They'll even tell you they're more focused on literature than literacy, what books that they want the kids to read, this, that, or the other. Text structure analysis, you could use that across the curriculum, actually looking at everything on the page, illustrations, the captions beside the illustrations, bold print, footnotes, text boxes, on the page. All of those things help, and even if you're reading a science or social studies book, before, during, and after reading activities, before you read about the government unit or the math unit, that's going to rely heavily on connecting prior knowledge to new information, which a lot of students won't have. A good deal of time should be spent preparing students to read that specific content information, and there comes your literacy, no matter what your branch of education is. And then vocabulary strategies. I think vocabulary is really underused, even in elementary school, where it should be like one of the most important things. It's essential for understanding content in those area texts. Even kids that read a lot might see words that they don't know, that are not familiar to them, when they're doing a new unit. So things like as word maps, handmade glossaries, classification and categorization activities to help them develop some strong content area vocabularies. It's hard to make a connection to a word that you don't know, or to understand and embed it in the text and just keep reading and understanding when it's something brand new for you. There are technology components. For me, these are some websites that are new to me. You may have heard of them for years. Starfall.com helps with basic phonics, and students can just do that bottom-up model themselves. They can do the letter identification, they can do phonemes, they can do blends, whatever level they're on. These are all some really good ones, and they're all free. I also use a tape recorder in class, some old school technology, because when students can hear themselves, they can hear the sounds that they're making, or I record me making the sounds, and then they can take this home and listen to those, or they can make them themselves and try to mimic me. We're doing a lot of stuff with a tape recorder that's working well for students reading, but not fluently. Even students that are reading, but they're robot reading, and there are these huge gaps between the words. I record them, and they hear what they're doing, and they crack up. Second graders think it's so funny to hear themselves doing that, but then they will correct it. An evaluation of theory. Theorists claim that bottom-up processing focuses on how readers extract information from the printed page. Beginning readers need a starting point, something concrete that they can hang their hat on before they go to that next step. A process such as letter recognition, phonics instruction, phonemic awareness, followed by whole words, word recognition, then comprehension, I think it's a successful way to begin. Theories that stress top-down processing hold that readers form hypotheses about which words they will encounter and then take in only just enough visual information to test their hypothesis. I think this is what we're going to read about. Let me see. Oh, yep, that's what we were going to read about. No, I was wrong. If you're not reading at all, I don't know how you're going to do that. You could look at pictures and that's about it. And that is something that we do. But you have to do more than that. It assumes that the reader has something to connect with when oftentimes they don't. Specifically with a text-rich page, it's got a lot of text and no images. You don't have anything to use to guide you or to do some of those top-down things with. But eventually, when you get some fluency going, some comprehension, merging both of those models together is going to be ideal. These are just the references only for the theory section. Thank you. I hope it won't be a big deal that I'm going to have to merge or try to embed 2 videos because I'm stressed out about it. But I am learning a lot and enjoying the class. Thank you.